Hi, you're listening to Status Stranded Saviors, Allie by David Halem. I hope you enjoy. Something about witchcraft or sorcery in general feels disrespectful. I can't place why. I know Rain is shaken from this morning for different reasons, but I know that there's still overlapping details that trouble all of us about this morning. There are lives here that will never be the same, specifically Kennocha and Csaba. Kennocha is old enough to know that her life shouldn't have been like that, but Csaba, the poor child, probably doesn't know anything else, or he isn't wholly aware there is more to life than the fear that captured him. Csaba was still in my arms, gingerly hugging my neck. There was a point in the walk where he seemed to relax more. I had concluded that he had fallen asleep. Rain had mentioned on the walk back that he saw ship lights in the sky. This is a first in years. It's been over 2 years since Earth was left behind, and since then we haven't had any interaction with any alien races. No flybys, no radio or video contact, no support, nothing. As we came to closer view of our base, an old modern Victorian-style house, colored a pale blue with the upstairs divided into 2 large rooms, we saw a hopeful sight for sore eyes. There were 24 or so large ships hovering over and around our base. These ships looked like fighter jets from days and years long ago, but there was far more to them than that. They had a wingspan that had to be up to 200 feet. From nose to tail, they were maybe 300 feet long. As far as the main compartment that had the different living quarters, bridge of the ship, cargo, and otherwise, that part had to be up to 75 feet tall and was molded and formed seamlessly to be aerodynamic with wings and tail of the ship. The tail of the ship was like that of a bird's tail, fanned out and added an appropriate amount of length to the ship. There was some engine in either wing that enabled the ships to float without wavering, and the tail had the same kind of levitation engine that the wings had. In the middle of either wing, towards the back of the wings, were 2 larger engines that were for forward movement. Overall, the ships had a metallic, subtle blue to them with bright silver lines, designed in choice places to have the appearance of a wolf's hide. There was a transparent glass-like canopy that was over the top of the front of the ships that extended to the middle of the center section in an elliptical shape. None of the ships looked bigger or smaller than the others. With that last detail alone, I had an idea of who we were meeting, and if this was the race I was thinking of. I'm curious as to what brings the Soto here. Well, I believe this is the Soto. Bridget, I hear Rain say behind me, you and Varney take the kids inside and have Slanie and Mallory look at them. Yes, sir, Bridget said with loyalty. Csaba was awake now, and I put him down on the ground and gently pointed towards Bridget. Csaba started walking towards Bridget, and Bridget puts on her best inviting smile. As he was walking towards Bridget, Csaba looked around and saw the ships in the sky around us. He froze in his tracks and started to whimper like he was going to cry. Bridget closed the distance and scooped him up in her arms. Come on, Csaba, let's go inside, she said with a smile on her face. Csaba looked at Bridget with amazement on his face. Where's the angel? Bridget laughed a little while she looked at me. The little boy looked around, then saw me and pointed with excitement. There she is! I was shocked and more pleasantly surprised by the action. I was flattered as well. A surprised smile appeared awkwardly on my face, and I walked over to join Rain, who himself was smiling a small smirk. We linked arms and I reached up to his ear. You've never called me an angel, I said with some sarcasm to my tone. Rain let out a short sound of amusement as both of us looked over at the spaceships hovering over and around our base. There was a section of the group of ships that seemed closer to the ground and the base than the others. Rain and I looked over at Marad, who was looking around at all the ships as well. Then he decided to go inside. Rain and I took a deep breath and started to walk towards the closer part of the group of ships. What are they here for? Do they want something? What could we possibly have to offer that they can accept or want? As we walked towards the bulk of the group, one of the ships silently flew closer to us and landed with the front of the ship facing towards us. The ship lowered closer to the ground until a ramp descended from the bottom hole of the ship, resting gently to the ground. Rain and I took a quick glance at each other, but we continued walking forward. We were about 50 feet away from the ship at this point. A humanoid figure started walking down from the ramp. The figure looked like a cleaner, more humanly defined werewolf. I say cleaner and more defined because unlike werewolves, this one didn't have a hunchback or exaggerated wolf-like limbs. But instead, this Wolfman was simply a human with wolf's fur and a wolf's head that was attached to the rest of his body via a thick neck that had more thickness on his back than on the sides. He stood to be about 6 feet tall. His eyes had sky blue irises in them, but you weren't able to see the whites of his eyes, just like any other dog or animal. His hands looked like normal human hands except for the fur, and instead of fingernails, he had claws. He had a bushy tail that came out of where you expected a tail to come from. The tail was a smoke color like the rest of him, and was slowly moving from side to side below his waist. He wore a more red tank top undershirt that looked to have the same armor properties that our undershirts had. Over the undershirt, he had on an ivory-colored trench coat made out of some kind of leather, but this leather seemed to be more scale-textured. The trench coat went down to his knees. He wore thick pants that looked to be made out of chainmail, and it made me think of Bridget's dress part of the armor with how fortified it was, and he wore boots that were certainly made for combat and made to be durable. As the Wolfman came closer to us, and as he drew closer, his eyes seemed to light up, and his wolf mouth opened like a dog happy to see his friends. I am blessed to discover that we have been lied to. I heard a voice, but the Wolfman's mouth didn't move as I heard the clearly male voice. Rain was confused as well. The Wolfman softly shook his head, put a hand over his chest, and bowed his head. My sincerest apologies. The disembodied voice had such a defined and formal sound to it. I have neglected my formalities in wake of my excitement. First, my name is Arthgallo. I hold title and position as leader of my clan, Soto's Rodina clan. Second, we found ourselves passing through and learned of a vacant planet formerly distinguished as Earth, a hopeless world. We reached a decision and made haste to rest. As we drew closer, we discovered an inconsistency. Other more dominant and powerful races declared Earth void and condemned. Differently, we found you. Third, we are knowledgeable of Earth's dire condition, and as our morals disallow, we are unable to neglect your lives to planetary banishment and a certain end to your people. Rain and I looked at each other in disbelief. Rain turned to Arthgallo and spoke. How do we know we can trust you? Arthgallo closed his eyes and appeared to be deep in thought. But what was strange about this was that it felt like his thoughts were leaking out like the disembodied voice spoke to us. Trust, of course. What gesture? Humans. Compassion? Variations of such. It felt like something warm was slowly moving through my mind, and I shook my head to shake the feeling. Arthgallo opened his eyes and had a sad look on his face. Again, my sincerest apologies. Not every race is familiar with how we communicate. Rain started to say something, but I cut him off. We forgive you. Let us help you with trust. Rain looked over at me with confusion, and I whispered in his ear so that Arthgallo couldn't hear from the distance he was at. Handshake. Arthgallo was making a motion at the corner of my vision, and I turned my attention to him. He was shaking one of his hands timidly. Like so? He asked without moving his mouth. I smiled in amusement. No, like this. I then turned to Rain and held out my hand for him to shake, and Rain and I shook hands. Rain's face started to express a small hint of a smile. Arthgallo walked the rest of the way towards us, and Rain and I closed the distance on our end as well. Both Rain and I shook hands with Arthgallo. Rain gave him a more firm handshake that surprised Arthgallo, and I gave our Soto guest a softer handshake. Arthgallo looked at both Rain and I before communicating. What are your names? I put my hand on the middle of Rain's chest and answered, This is Rain. Then I gestured to myself, and I am Allie. Arthgallo smiled like a dog would smile. Who of you leads your clan? Both Rain and I lead our clan, I answered. Our Soto visitor had a satisfied expression come upon himself, and he raised his head to accompany it. You rule as king and queen? I shook my head. No, we lead as leaders. Arthgallo closed his eyes and lowered his head, his face showing more of an understanding. Understood. My apologies, sweet leadership. I picked up an earlier part of the discussion. You said that because of your morals, you won't allow yourselves to leave us to die. I said as I stepped forward a small step. Are there stipulations? Stipulation? No, but a request. As you lead your clan, if kindness extends and favor extends you, stand with us against those who come against our Rodina clan. Arthgallo raised his head and looked at us at an angle, his eyes a fraction brighter than before. No stipulation, sweet leadership. You are knowledgeable of your clan members in every way. Our wishful desire elevate you from your dire situation, for what a disgrace it is to leave one's people. He paused for a second. Apologies. What a disgrace it is to lead two's people on a perishing world to absolutely perish with. He presented the idea to us. We eagerly yearn to assist and alleviate. We present a gift of great splendor. For you, sweet leadership, a ship of our own, now in your possession and control. In a very exaggerated motion, he gestured with one arm to the side and slightly into the air. Rain and I looked to where Arthgallo gestured, and one of the ships flew down next to the first ship smoothly and silently. My eyes widened in surprise. Are you sure? This is too much. Certainly not, madame. We could never bear to assist in any lesser fashion, he told us with deep sincerity. We gift to you as well pilots, navigators, knowledgeable advisors, and tradeworthy treasures, masterpieces, and currency, all in your ownership and command. Are you sure? I was still in disbelief. Arthgallo raised his head in a familiar look of confidence. Most certainly, sweet leadership. Rain and I looked at each other, and he gestured with his head for us to take a moment to talk about this. I turned to Arthgallo. One moment. I didn't see his reaction to that. Rain and I separated our arms and went to a decent distance away and closer to our base. Rain spoke up. We can't decline this. I nodded. We're in no position to decline. Do you believe them? Yeah, I believe them. I answered. Do you? Rain glanced quickly over at Arthgallo. With salt, he finally said. But I do believe them. Then let's tell them that we accept, sweet leadership, I said with finality and amusement in my tone. Rain cracked a smile. At this point in the morning, with all the shit that's happened, I'll welcome that remark as much as I can, Rain said. There may not be stipulations on their end, but I've already thought up rules for certain people in our clan. Yeah, of course. Rain looked over at Arthgallo. Now let's tell the nice doggy our response. I laughed a little at that, and with this amusement in the air, Rain and I linked arms again and approached Arthgallo. I answered, We accept your gifts. An excited expression came over his face. If you would, please give us a few hours to collect everything we need to take with us, I requested. Arthgallo looked confused. My apologies, I am puzzled. What is an hour? I do not know if I have hours to give. I was about to say something, but Rain's voice was more dominant. Is the world gonna end today? He asked our wolf friend. Most certainly not. Then we have plenty of hours to do what we need to do. Arthgallo tilted his head in a thinking gesture. This is ponderous. Differently, I may understand. We will be patient for you, sweet leadership. I smiled as I said, Thank you, generous friends. Arthgallo had a very excited expression on his face after I said that. Then Rain and I turned to go into our base. As Rain and I went to the front door, we passed Gregor, who had taken front door guard after Titos took a break for the rest of the morning. We told Gregor to come inside with us, and he eagerly did so. The morning clamor and chatter was a steady, offbeat rhythm of talking, silverware on plates, coughing, and glasses on the table in one of the rooms. With how many of us there were, we ate our meals in different stages and cycles. First the women and children, excluding the house leaders. Then the men, excluding the house leaders. Then the house leaders. Then finally Rain, one of the other guards, and I. Breakfast and dinner were the only 2 times that everyone was in the house. Rain projected his voice for everyone in the house to hear. If I could have your attention for a moment. The morning clamor quieted down. Thank you, Rain then continued. If you aren't already aware, the Soto have come to get us off Earth. This isn't guaranteed safety, this is a safety from our dying planet. I felt my heart sink a fraction as he said those last few words. There are some things I need to establish and make clear before we go out into space, Rain explained, and everyone was intently looking at him with eager eyes, despite the morning hour. First, don't fire guns in the spaceship. That will end very poorly for everyone. Housekeepers? Rain then made a gesture to cover the ears of the children, and they did so. Second, don't fuck with the aliens. In my mind, that's too close to bestiality. Third, don't fuck with the aliens. We don't want to cause any trouble with the Soto who are being so kind to help us. Rain then made a gesture that allowed the housekeepers to take their fingers out of the children's ears. The latter part for the children, don't be goofy with the aliens. Everyone nodded and made verbal confirmation excitedly. Finally, terminology is different. Take it in stride, and if you have any other questions, use your common sense. Understood? Fuck yeah! Marad exclaimed. Then Marad was swiftly punched in the face by Titos, the punch knocking Marad to the ground. Rain had a slightly mad expression impede his more placid excitement. Understood? There were out-of-sync confirmations from our group in the different rooms, and excitement started to buzz from within ourselves. Rain nodded. Good. After we eat, we pack and collect everything we need and want to take with us. Then we're gone. He finished with a slight smile on his face. He then turned to me. Let's get all of our things together. Yeah, and sometime before we leave, you have to talk to Marid. That hasn't escaped my mind. I sighed, but excitement coursed through my veins as Rain and I went upstairs to collect our belongings. The cycle of her clothes smelt like salt because that was what we used to clean them. We've gotten used to the salt in our clothes, but if the salt is so bad, we just take them out and shake them outside. Rain and I took the sheet off her bed and put out clothes in the middle of the bed sheet. We could separate whose clothes were whose later when we were in space flying away from here. That's such a strange thing to think about. Going to space. I've been told a little bit about space. Mainly the fact that if you try to comprehend the scale of how big the universe is, you'll become desensitized to the overall beauty of everything out there. So many stars of so many colors, with so many worlds and races to explore and see. The clouds of galaxies, the glow of the nebulous clusters, and the soundless peace out there. Awe-striking. Rain only has 8 or 10 sets of clothes, and I have up to 15 or 20 sets of clothes. Rain knows the exact number because he's that kind of analytical about it all. We had all of the clothes put together in our bed sheets, and we together took our clothes outside and into our ship. It looked like they had cleaned everything to be spotless, or the Soto are naturally clean creatures. The Soto are precious creatures. I love how they talk, or communicate. To my understanding, they communicate telepathically in ideas, and then we translate it into how we understand the thought. The communication is surprisingly colorful, and it's fun to experience. At least I think so. A few of the Soto in similar clothing as Arthgallo, except for dark green trench coats instead of ivory, and hazel undershirts instead of red. The eyes of these Soto were either pale green, a bright copper color, or diamond white, and their fur ranged from starch white to jet black. One of the Soto directed us to one of the living quarters of the ship. The room Rain and I were given had one wall completely made into a window so we could see outside. Right now there was nothing to see, but I eagerly anticipated later today when there will be something to see through the window. The walls were the same metallic as the outside, but these walls had more of a dark green undertone to them than blue. Heck, I would go so far as to say it could have been teal. There were 2 beds in the smaller room, which was just fine for Rain and I because we didn't want to share the same bed yet. Time seemed to blaze and blur around me like a fog. At some point this morning, Rain and I went into the armory room and helped move a large number of weapons from the base to the ship. At some point I checked in with Slanie to make sure Kennocha and Csaba were in good condition. To my relief, they were in good condition. The last full thing that I remember before we took off with the Soto was doing a final head count. I was surprised time reached this last moment so fast. I counted in my head, always count myself last. Varney, Hasna, Anton, Evelina, Bridget with Csaba and Mallory, Slanie was with Kennocha, Kalliope and Sadria were walking together, Titos and Gregor were walking together, Qadir walked in with Linda, Marid, and Vernon, then Rain walked in with Ojore, and finally myself, 20 of us. In Rain and I's room, I moved my bed to where when I was sitting up I was facing a large window that took over the wall. In the higher decks of the ship, Rain was assigning ship positions for some of our group to serve and operate with the Soto Wolves that we've been given as clan members. Going off of what I know of our group and what Rain knows, some of the positions should be similar or relatable to what our members were already set to doing. Sadria and Kalliope were put with the interracial study and report specialists due to their backgrounds. Anton and Ojore are shadowing the pilots. Of course, Slanie was making herself comfortable in the medical ward of the ship. The house leaders, or keepers, Linda, Mallory, and Evelina, were making sure that everyone was situating well in their rooms. Rain and Qadir were speaking with the other owners of the ship, learning about the capabilities and limits of the ship, and how that relates to other ships in this galaxy cluster, and the other warriors of the group. Marid, Titos, Gregor, Bridget, Hasna, and Varney were sorting out our weapons to fit in the weapons vault. Why wasn't I up there doing something? I'm thinking about this morning, and thinking about this morning is making me think about the years gone by. Witchcraft troubles me in general, but there's some experiences to go with that. Certain longings awaken at specific sights and experiences. Seeing Rain stuck clawing at his neck nigh helpless, repeatedly hitting his right shoulder as a kill command for the rest of us to adhere to. There's something about him fighting so hard with death gripping him that reminded me of his father, and how I vowed I would never lose another family member after Rain and I lost the last one 6 months ago. No, 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 no. No, don't go there. There's nothing good there. No, don't think about that. There's no reward. No. No, 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 no. I blinked. In the darkness was the image of my dad's burning body, and the piercing sounds of the fire popping and crackling in my ears, tearing bleeding holes into the tainted dead silence. My eyes opened from the blink, and my hands were shaking from trepidation and anger that pulsed through my veins. I blinked. Rain's mother held the gun to Rain's head and shot it, sending a bleeding crimson fountain out of the back of his head. I screamed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst at the seams and bleed its luminescent golden wine out of my ears, nose, mouth, and eyes. Allie! Rain was holding my head as my bones shook from the terror that overcame me. It's okay. It's okay. You're here now, he said softly and almost out of breath. Deep breaths, honey, he said, still holding my head gently in the palms of his hands. He kissed me on the forehead, and tears were already streaming down my face from the episode. I took a few shaking deep breaths and put my shaking hands on Rain's steady hands, on my temples. Another shaking breath. I closed my eyes and everything was gone. I was met with silent darkness, only perturbed by my shaking breaths. We're about to take off, Rain said. How okay are you? I shook my head and words were barely able to escape my lips. Not very. I opened my eyes and Rain nodded to someone behind me. Slanie. Slanie was one of the shorter young ladies here. She isn't the smallest, and she certainly isn't big. She has fair skin, short, straight red hair, and gray eyes like metal. She was wearing a dandelion-colored skirt that went down to her knees, and a black breastplate with red lines in an Art Deco style under her arms, and seeping a little onto her front that left her tattooed arms and part of her back exposed. If I remember right, she's one of the 2 people we have that were born on the moon before those bases were abandoned. Slanie had me sit down on the bed as she checked my vitals, and as she was finishing up, the landscape outside began to sink below our known horizon as the horizon slipped out of view going away from us. The skies seemed to separate into black above and blue below, and in the black above I can faintly see the stars. We flew past the moon, and I stood up from the bed to look down at Earth. I didn't sob, but tears rolled down my face in sorrow as I looked at the pitiful planet we were leaving behind. Earth can be saved, but no one is looking past the crumbling crust and the smoke-filled horizon. The Mediterranean flat was a black patch of earth where the ocean used to reside. This was true for multiple parts of the world. The Great Lakes were gone before I was born, and I think I was 10 when the Black Sea was lost. The sadness and excitement conflicted with each other within me. I decided to distract myself slightly. How am I, Slanie? Aside from the unknown, there's nothing new to report. You're stressed, Allie. I nodded as the ship and accompanying ships made a formation, and seconds later streaks of light drew smooth lines across the vast expanse as we soared swiftly through the void. I smiled. I almost feel liberated. Something that Rain had in his pocket made a tone, and a voice came through. Boss, we see readings of some ships entering the area where Earth is. Should we intervene? Rain took the device from his pocket and spoke into it. Don't bother. Our business is no longer there. Yes, sir. My heart sank at the thought, but my spirits were lifted by a feeling of hope out there in the vast expanse of the final frontier.
Hi, this is David Halem, and you just finished listening to Savior's Allie from my story, Status Stranded. I hope you enjoyed. See you next week.